Good afternoon. How are you? Well, the sun is out. That's refreshing. The temperature is 37, so it's still a little chilly. And the wind is at 3 miles an hour, so it's not bad. We keep talking about Trump as the dictator, and that's legitimate, and that's what he's aiming for, and that's what he's doing. But there's another concept that I think makes his demand to be a dictator more likely to be received by too many. And that's kind of the concept of the dictatorship by society, suppressing the individual mind and conscience. So in other words, we're not resisting just one man who may have created what we're dealing with starting in 2015. And so the freedom that we seek is not to conform, not to be forced to conform. But all around us, we see that that's what Trump and his corrupt minion want. I've talked before about how having a standard gives you something by which you can measure the conduct or appropriateness or rightness or morality or lawfulness or constitutionality of something. But if you don't have those things, then you have no inner moral gyroscope. I'm sure you've played with a gyroscope from time to time and how it keeps a balance and how they're used in aviation and other circumstances. But what about an individual having a moral gyroscope by which he or she measures, institutions measure what should happen? But we're talking about the people who are outer directed. In other words, they're not directed by themselves. They're outer directed to conform. So there was a book years ago, was it Sinclair Lewis, Babbitt. And Babbitt was agonizingly seeking to conform. And when he found this is going back a ways, he's finding a restlessness in his conformity. He then does things without having a moral gyroscope, if you will, that put his entire personal universe at risk. And so he reverts to conforming. But this is a special kind of conforming that we're dealing with. I don't know if you ever read or heard Ginsberg, but Ginsberg was a beat poet. And he wrote, among other things, a thing called Howl. And he wrote it. It was drug-induced, but it was spread over a long period of time. And I've heard, and you could probably get it on YouTube, him reading the poem. But one of the lines in it that sticks out is at the very beginning in the first of 3 parts. And he says, "I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness." Well, you see, that is what we're seeing. If you probably had a conversation with somebody you thought you always understood and that always made sense and were sensible, and you mentioned Trump or one of the issues that are tied to Trump, and they look at you as if you're crazy, you're mad. Now, I may be distorting what Ginsberg would say if he were here today to comment on my commenting on his work. But you get the point. And there have been nominations that underscore that point. And one of the recent appointments by Trump is Dillian, who is from California. And she represented, I think this is the thing, I actually don't know. This person represented Google when a man was fired from Google for arguing that men are better suited to technical jobs. It's the biological differences, he explained. And so he was fired. I think that's fair. Now, she represented him because she was representing the rights of a man not to be discriminated against in this way. And she was also one who filed suit against the California governor's stay-at-home policy during COVID. And that's an interesting fight to look at because she's not the only one who was involved in it. And it was, this person was not the only one involved in this. And it's kind of the test between capitalism and labor. Capitalism to make a buck, labor to protect them from possible death by a pandemic. Very interesting, you know. And this is the kind of decision making that the head of civil rights for the Department of Justice would have to deal with. And plainly, that's not good. There was also the difference, if you remember, between churches who collectively did not want to have services at a distance. So it was the church against labor. And this is striking when you consider what the scriptures say about these things. So this is what we're looking at, these outer directed individuals with no stable gyroscope to dictate what they're doing. And so, in essence, Dillian is for diminishing individual rights, not expanding them, not protecting them, not preserving them. And we see that this is a problem. Even people like McConnell, looking at another one of the nominees, RFK Jr., for undermining public science, public confidence in proven cures, particularly for polio. And his general question, RFK Jr.'s, about the efficacies of the vaccines. This is not acceptable. So it's kind of a terrible set of values coming from Trump, but also, I won't say flourishing, but strong and existing in our society, in our so-called nation of freedom. And so this is a real problem. Now, you may follow Killer Luigi and the chief executive that he shot and he's suspected of shooting and killing. And he's been trying to challenge the extradition. And I did this years ago myself in a case. It wasn't a homicide, but it was a difficult case. And what I found was challenging the extradition, or rendition it's called, is effective in helping a defense counsel, me in that case, get discovery. And or because the rendition requires an indictment in the interstate compact by which one state hands over to another a putative and or actual defendant of a crime. And the crime has to be one that is recognized in such a fashion. So there's a mutuality in enforcement. And there's been a local lawyer who's been handling it and who's been challenging the extradition. But now there's an ADA, assistant district attorney, who is prominent in the DA's office in Manhattan. And Friedman is apparently going to appear on behalf of Luigi Mangione, and there's talk that he will, under her guidance, see, I'm doing it again because I have no idea of the sex of the person, but if, as a former member of the district attorney's office, this new council may consent to the rendition extradition. So there we have an interesting situation. Now, in a way, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't think vigilantes should be allowed to kill people, but I do believe that we're having this kind of violence because our so-called judicial system isn't working. And making a demand for a rendition that makes sense is maybe not a bad idea, A, to get discovery, but also perhaps to discover that they don't have the evidence. And the word is that sometime next week, the DA's office in Manhattan will indict. And I can see, even at this distance, as most of you can see, that there are problems in the prosecution. So, those are a couple of my observations today. And it's nice to be out and to be out in the sunlight. And it's coming down at that time when it has that golden feel, color, embrace. So, what we need is for some people to get a backbone. You know, it's a metaphorical phrase for having a conscience, in my opinion, for having a standard by which you measure what's going on. And how do we correct it? We stand for these values instead of letting this hateful, do what you want to whomever you want philosophy that's raging across the land. So, and by the way, go listen to Ginsburg. It may not, you find, have any bearing on today, but it's quite a jaunt in his memory, expression, observation, and drug-fueled mind. So that's what I got for today in our cathedral of bare trees. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.